Hi guys, and welcome to Boring History Relaxing. Tonight we step quietly into a medieval home on a bitter winter evening, where the cold is not just outside, but waiting patiently at every crack in the walls, ready to slip in the moment the fire weakens. You stand at the threshold, your breath already visible in the dim air, and you realize very quickly that warmth here is not a background comfort. It is a constant task. A small victory won and lost many times in a single night. And as you look around, taking in the low ceiling, the faint glow of embers and the pungent smell of smoke that never quite leaves you, may begin to suspect something else. You probably would not survive this very long without learning fast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you feel like it, share where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. It is always nice to imagine all of us scattered across different places listening together in this quiet moment. Now dim the lights. You step fully inside and the first thing you notice is the fire. It is not large, not dramatic, nothing like the roaring fireplaces you might picture from films. Instead, it sits low and steady in the center of the room, its glow soft and uneven. This is the hearth, the heart of the home in the most literal sense. Everything here seems to bend around it. The people, the furniture, even the rhythm of the day. A widely accepted historical understanding tells us that in many medieval homes, especially among ordinary families, the hearth was placed centrally, with smoke escaping through a simple hole in the roof or through loosely constructed vents. There is no chimney as you might expect, no efficient system guiding smoke neatly upward. Instead, the smoke rises, slowly, hesitates, and then drifts, filling the upper air before slipping out in uncertain streams. You tilt your head slightly and your eyes begin to sting almost immediately. The air is thick, not suffocating, but persistent. It clings to your clothes, settles into your hair, and leaves a faint bitterness at the back of your throat. And yet no one here seems particularly bothered. This is simply how it is. A small child shifts closer to the fire, stretching their hands toward the warmth. An older woman sits nearby, her posture relaxed but attentive, as if she is always listening to the fire's quiet language. She adjusts a piece of wood with a stick, nudging it into place with practiced ease. There is no wasted movement. Every action feels learned, repeated, necessary. You move closer too, feeling the warmth on your hands first, then your face. It is uneven. One side of you warms quickly while the other remains cold, reminding you that this heat does not spread far. You begin to understand something important. The fire does not heat the room. It heats the people who gather around it. There is a quiet logic to the way everyone positions themselves. Not too close, not too far, close enough to draw warmth, far enough to avoid the constant smoke and sparks. You find yourself adjusting your stance, instinctively mirroring them without thinking. A lesser-known detail reveals that in some households, embers from the hearth were carefully preserved overnight under ash, allowing families to restart the fire in the morning without needing to create a new flame from scratch. The idea of letting the fire go out completely was not just inconvenient. It could be deeply risky, especially in colder months when relighting a fire was not always easy. You glance down at the glowing coals half hidden beneath a layer of pale ash. They look almost asleep, but there is life in them still, a quiet, steady heat that waits to be woken again. Historians still argue whether most households were able to maintain a continuous fire throughout winter, or whether many families frequently had to relight their hearths due to fuel shortages and changing conditions. As you stand here watching the careful attention given to even the smallest ember, you begin to suspect that losing the fire, even briefly, would have been more than an inconvenience. It would have changed the entire rhythm of the day. The room itself is simple. Rough wooden beams stretch across the ceiling, darkened by years of smoke. The walls made of wattle and daub feel solid enough at a glance, but you can sense the subtle drafts that slip through them. Every now and then, a faint thread of cold air brushes against your skin, reminding you that outside winter is still waiting. You take a slow breath and the smell becomes clearer now. Smoke, yes, but also damp earth, old wood, and something faintly sweet from the remnants of cooked food. It is not unpleasant, just unfamiliar. A layered scent that tells you this space is lived in, used, constantly, rarely empty. A man enters from outside, pushing open a heavy wooden door. For a brief moment, the cold rushes in with him, sharp and immediate. The warmth you felt near the fire falters and you instinctively step closer to it. He closes the door quickly, pressing it shut with a firm hand as if sealing something fragile inside. You notice how everyone reacts, not with alarm, but with awareness. The door is not just an entrance, it is a boundary between survival and discomfort. The man carries a small bundle of wood. Nothing large, nothing excessive. He places it carefully near the hearth, not throwing it down, not wasting it. Each piece matters. Each one represents time spent gathering, chopping, carrying. Warmth, you begin to realize, is not just about fire. It is about effort. You shift your weight and look down at the floor. It is not smooth. It is packed earth covered in places with scattered rushes and bits of straw. They provide a small layer of insulation, a thin barrier between your feet and the cold ground beneath. You can feel the difference where the covering is thicker, slightly softer, slightly warmer. Somewhere in the room, a quiet conversation continues. Voices are low, steady, unhurried. There is no sense of rushing through the evening. Time here feels slower, shaped by light and heat rather than clocks. You notice how no one strays far from the hearth. Even when moving about, they remain within its she, orbiting it in subtle patterns. It's not just a source of warmth, it's a centre of life. Cooking happens here, talking happens here, resting happens here. And as you stand among them, feeling the uneven warmth on your skin and the constant presence of smoke in the air, something begins to settle in your mind. This is not a place designed for comfort in the way you understand it. It is a place designed for endurance. The fire flickers slightly, and for a moment the shadows on the walls shift and stretch, dancing slowly across the rough surfaces. You watch them without thinking, your breathing beginning to match the quiet rhythm of the room. Outside, the cold presses against the walls. Inside, the fire holds it back. Just enough. You remain close to the hearth, letting your hands hover in that narrow band of warmth where the fire actually reaches. After a few moments, you begin to notice something else. The room is not empty space. It is full. Not crowded in a chaotic way, but filled with presence. People, bodies, movement, breath. All of it contributes to a kind of warmth that is quieter than fire, but just as important. You shift slightly to make room as someone settles beside you. There is no formal invitation, no careful spacing like you might expect in your own time. Proximity here is natural, necessary. You can feel the heat from the person next to you faint at first, then more noticeable as you remain still. A commonly accepted historical fact is that many medieval families lived, worked and slept in a single main room, especially in rural or lower-income households. Separate heated rooms were rare. Space was shared not just for convenience, but because it allowed whatever warmth existed to be concentrated rather than lost. You look around more carefully now. A child leans against a parent half asleep, their small body tucked close. Two others sit shoulder to shoulder, speaking softly, their voices blending into the low background murmur. Even those who move about do so within a limited area, never straying far from the centre. At first it might feel like a lack of privacy, but as you stand here something else becomes clearer. This closeness is not just social, it is practical. Every person in this room adds a little more heat, a little more protection against the cold that seeps in from outside. You become aware of your own body in a new way. The warmth you generate, small as it is, contributes to the shared space. You are not just receiving warmth, you are part of it. A more obscure detail suggests that in particularly harsh winters, people sometimes slept multiple to a bed, not only for comfort, but specifically to conserve heat, arranging themselves in ways that minimized exposed space. The idea of sleeping alone in a large cold room would have seemed not luxurious, but wasteful. You glance toward one side of the room where bedding has already been laid out. It is not separated by walls or doors. just an area defined by habit, by routine. You can imagine how later in the night this same room will transform again, from a place of activity to a place of rest without ever truly losing its warmth. Historians continue to debate how much of this closeness was driven purely by necessity, and how much also shaped social bonds and family structures in lasting ways. As you watch the quiet interactions around you, it's difficult to separate the two. Warmth and connection seem to blend together here, each reinforcing the other. A faint laugh rises from across the room, soft and brief. It does not break the calm, it settles into it. The atmosphere remains steady, almost rhythmic. You notice how voices rarely rise. Loudness would feel out of place, as if it might disturb something delicate. You shift your feet again and feel the uneven floor beneath you. The rushes compress slightly under your weight, releasing a faint dry scent. It mixes with the sun, creating a smell that is oddly grounding. Earth-fire life all held together in one enclosed space. Someone passes behind you, brushing lightly against your shoulder. There is no apology, no hesitation. Movement here is fluid, shaped by familiarity rather than formality. You adjust without thinking, stepping a little closer to the hearth, then a little to the side, making space for others while maintaining your own position within the warmth. You begin to understand how carefully balanced this is. Too many people too far from the fire and the warmth thins. Too many gathered too tightly and movement becomes difficult. But here it seems to settle into a natural rhythm refined over countless evenings just like this one. The door creaks slightly as the wind presses against it from outside. For a moment you can hear it clearly, a low constant force reminding you again of the world beyond these walls. The cold does not disappear, it waits, patient. Inside, the warmth feels more fragile now that you are aware of it. Not weak, but dependent. It relies on the fire, yes, but also on the people, on their presence, their stillness, their shared space. You notice how no one sits alone unless they must. Even the older woman near the fire, who seemed at first to be separate, is within easy reach of others. A hand could be extended, a word spoken. There is always a connection, even in silence. You lower yourself carefully to sit among them. The ground is firm beneath you, but the layer of straw softens it just enough. As you settle, the warmth changes again. It surrounds you more evenly now, rising from the fire, but also from the bodies nearby. Your shoulders relax without you realizing it. There is something deeply human in this arrangement. Something simple, almost instinctive. In a world without controlled temperature, without insulated walls and sealed windows, warmth is not something you set and forget. It is something you build together. You glance at the child leaning against their parent again. Their breathing is slow, steady, safe. The adult shifts slightly, adjusting their position just enough to keep the child covered, protected from any stray draft. No words are exchanged, none are needed. You feel the heat of the fire on your hands, the warmth of the people around you at your sides, and the faint chill that still lingers at your back where the air moves more freely. It is not perfect, it is not even, but it is enough. And here enough is everything. The fire crackles softly and a small spark lifts into the air before fading. No one reacts. It is part of the background, as familiar as breathing. You begin to notice your own breathing now. Slower, deeper, matching the pace of the room. The urgency you felt when you first stepped inside has faded, replaced by something steadier, a quiet awareness. Warmth, you realize, is not just a condition here. It is a shared experience, one that depends on closeness, on cooperation, on the simple act of staying together. And as the evening continues, you remain where you are, surrounded by the low murmur of voices, the steady presence of others, and the constant gentle work of the fire. Holding the cold back, together, you remain seated, your body slowly adjusting to the uneven warmth of the room when your attention drifts toward the walls themselves. At first glance, they seem solid enough, thick wooden frames filled with a pale textured material that looks almost like dried earth. But the longer you sit here, the more you begin to notice what they cannot do. A faint line of cold slips along your neck. You turn slightly, and there it is again. Not a strong gust, not dramatic, just a thin thread of air that finds its way through. You would almost miss it if you were not sitting still. A widely recognized historical fact tells us that many medieval homes were built using wattle and daub, a method that involved weaving wooden strips and covering them with a mixture of mud straw and sometimes animal dung. It created walls that were relatively quick to build and reasonably sturdy, but not especially good at sealing out cold air. You reach out and lightly touch the surface beside you. It feels firm, slightly rough, but not impenetrable. You can imagine how over time small cracks would form, how weather age and constant use would open tiny pathways for the outside world to creep in. And outside, the cold is patient. It does not rush, it does not need to. It simply waits, pressing gently against every weak point, every seam, every place where the wall is just a little less than perfect. A more unusual detail suggests that in some regions people attempted to improve insulation by adding extra layers of clay or even hanging thick textiles against interior walls during winter months. These efforts were not always consistent or fully effective, but they reflect a clear awareness of the problem. You can almost picture someone standing where you are now, noticing that same faint draft and deciding to do something about it. Historians still debate how effective these methods truly were, especially given the variability in materials, climate, and construction skill. Some argue that such additions made a noticeable difference, while others believe they only slightly reduced the discomfort without ever truly solving it. As you sit here feeling that occasional brush of cold against your skin, it becomes easier to believe the latter. Your gaze lifts toward the upper part of the room. The ceiling is low, supported by heavy beams darkened from years of smoke. Near the top, the air looks hazy, layered with a thin veil that shifts gently with the movement of heat. You notice something else now. The warmth rises. It gathers above you, lingering near the ceiling, while the lower part of the room where you sit remains cooler by comparison. You can feel it clearly. Your face and hands are warm near the fire, but your feet resting on the packed earth floor still hold a trace of chill. The house does not trap heat efficiently. It allows it to move, to drift upward, to escape in small, continuous losses. You glance toward the door again. It looks solid, made of thick planks, but even here there are gaps. Small spaces along the edges where the wood does not meet perfectly. When the wind presses from outside, you can see the faintest movement of air slip through. Someone nearby notices it too. Without a word, they shift a piece of cloth, tucking it loosely along the base of the door. It is not a perfect seal, but it is something. You begin to understand that much of life here involves these small adjustments. Nothing is completely fixed, nothing fully solved, only managed. A softer sound draws your attention to the floor. As someone walks across it, the rushes and straw shift, slightly revealing the packed earth beneath. The ground itself holds cold, slowly drawing heat away from anything resting on it. You lift your foot slightly and then place it back down. The difference is subtle but noticeable. Where the straw is thicker, there is a faint insulation. Where it thins, the cold returns more sharply. In wealthier homes, you might find wooden floors or even stone carefully laid, but yes, here the ground remains close, almost part of the living space itself. And yet, for all its limitations, the house still offers something vital: shelter. The walls may not stop every draft, but they block the wind. They break the force of winter into something softer, more manageable. Without them, the fire would struggle. The warmth you feel would vanish almost instantly into the open air. You imagine standing outside now. The same cold that feels distant in here would wrap around you, fully pressing in from all sides. There would be no center, no place to gather warmth. Inside, imperfect as it is, there is at least a boundary. You shift slightly, pulling your arms close to your body. The warmth near the fire still reaches you, but you are more aware now of how limited it is. It does not fill the room. It creates pockets, zones of comfort that fade as you move away. The people around you seem to understand this instinctively. They remain within those zones, adjusting their positions with subtle movements, always aware of where the warmth is strongest. No one leans back against the wall for long. No one chooses the edges of the room unless they must. Everything draws inward toward the winter. A faint creak runs through the structure as the wind outside shifts direction. The beams hold steady, but the sound reminds you again that this house is not a sealed box. It is a structuring conversation with its environment, constantly responding to pressure, temperature, and time. You glance once more at the walls, seeing them differently now. Not as barriers that keep the cold out, but as filters. They slow it down, they reduce its strength. They give the people inside a chance to respond. That is enough! The fire flickers again and the light dances across the uneven surfaces, highlighting every texture, every imperfection. You watch as the shadows stretch and contract, moving in quiet rhythm with the flames. And as you sit there aware of every draft, every small effort to hold warmth in place, you begin to understand something deeper. Warmth here is not built into the house. It is negotiated, maintained through constant awareness, small actions, and shared understanding. The walls help, but they are only part of the story. You stay where you are, watching the fire with a little more attention now, as if it has begun to reveal its quiet importance to you. At first, it seems simple. A small flame, a steady glow. But the longer you remain in this room, the more you realize that this fire is never truly at rest. Even when it looks calm, it is being managed. The older woman leans forward again, using a thin piece of wood to shift the embers slightly. She does not add fuel immediately. Instead, she studies it. You notice the way her eyes follow the faint red glow beneath the ash, as if she is reading something written there. A well-established historical fact tells us that maintaining a household fire in the medieval period required constant attention, especially in winter. Fire was not something you simply lit and forgot. It needed to be fed, carefully adjusted, and protected from dying out, particularly overnight. You watch as she gently pulls aside a layer of ash, exposing a deeper pocket of heat. The embers glow brighter for a moment, responding to the air. Then she places a small piece of wood on top, not too large, not too quickly. It catches slowly, almost reluctantly, before beginning to burn. There is no rush in her movements. Everything is measured. You begin to understand that too much wood at once could smother the fire. Too little and it would fade. The balance is delicate, done through repetition rather than instruction. A lesser-known detail suggests that in some households, specific tools like fire dogs or simple iron supports were used to position wood more efficiently, allowing air to circulate and flames to grow steadily. But in simpler homes like this one, it is often just skill and experience guiding each small adjustment. Historians still debate how widespread such tools were among ordinary families, with some suggesting they were limited to wealthier households, while others believe simpler versions may have been more common than once thought. Looking at the way the fire is managed here, it seems clear that even without specialized tools, knowledge itself becomes the most important resource. You lean slightly closer, watching how the flames respond. They rise gently, then settle, their movements slow and almost hypnotic. The sound is soft. A quiet crackle occasionally pops as moisture escapes from the wood. You can feel the warmth shift again. It grows stronger for a moment, then steadies. The fire is alive in a way that feels almost personal. You glance down at the bed of ashen embers again, remembering what you noticed earlier. This is not just about the present moment, it is about continuity. About making sure that this fire, this small source of warmth, does not disappear. A more unusual detail reveals that in some regions, people carried embers from one place to another, using small containers, allowing them to transport fire, rather than create it from scratch each time. The idea of sharing or preserving fire extended beyond a single household. You imagine what it would mean to lose it completely. No glow beneath the ash, no easy way to bring it back. Relighting a fire in these conditions would not be simple. It would take time, effort, and the right materials. And in the cold, time matters. You notice how the people in the room seem to check the fire without speaking. Glance here. A small adjustment there. No one announces it. No one needs to. It is a shared responsibility understood without explanation. Even the children seem aware of it, keeping a certain distance, moving carefully around it. The fire is both comfort and risk. Too close and it can burn. Too far and it cannot help you. You shift your hands again, feeling the warmth on your skin. It is stronger now, but still limited. It reaches only so far and beyond that the seldom. The man who brought in the wood earlier now selects another piece, turning it in his hands as if judging its weight, its dryness. He places it beside the fire, not directly into it, waiting, There is a rhythm here. Fuel is added not when the fire is gone, but before it weakens too much. Always slightly ahead of need, always anticipating. You begin to sense how this would shape the entire day. Someone must always be aware, always ready to act, even at night. You glance toward the bedding again, imagining the later hours. The room darkened, the voices quiet. And still the fire must be watched. A faint shift in the embers draws your attention back. The older woman leans forward once more, adjusting the ash covering certain parts while leaving others exposed. It seems almost counterintuitive, but you realize what she is doing, protecting the heat. By covering the embers, she slows their burn, allowing them to last longer, preserving them through the night. You feel a small sense of admiration for the precision of it. This is not guesswork. It is knowledge passed down, refined over time. The flames dip slightly, becoming less visible, but the glow beneath remains strong. The room dims just a little, the shadows deepening along the walls, and yet the warmth does not vanish. It lingers held in that quiet layer beneath the surface. You listen to the sound of the fire again, softer now, slower, almost like breathing. Outside the wind presses faintly against the walls again, but inside the fire continues its quiet work. You begin to understand something important. The fire is not just about creating warmth. It is about sustaining it, moment by moment, hour by hour, without pause. And as you sit there watching the careful balance between flame and ember, between exposure and protection, you realize that this small, steady presence at the center of the room is the result of constant attention, never abandoned, never taken for granted, always alive because someone is always watching. You remain by the hearth watching the softened glow of the embers when your eyes begin to water again. At first it feels like a small irritation, something you could ignore, but the longer you sit here the more it builds. The smoke does not rise cleanly. It drifts. It lingers. It finds its way into your eyes, your nose, your throat. You blink slowly, trying to adjust, but the sting returns gentle but persistent. The air itself feels textured now, as if it carries something you cannot quite escape. A widely accepted historical fact tells us that in many medieval homes without proper chimneys, smoke from the hearth would fill the interior before gradually escaping through roof openings or loose structures above. This meant people lived daily with low levels of smoke exposure, especially in colder months when fires burned constantly. You tilt your head upward slightly and see it more clearly now. A faint grey haze gathers near the ceiling, shifting slowly with the warmth rising from the fire. It moves in soft layers, almost like a second atmosphere above you, and yet it does not stay there. It dips, it curls. Every so often a thin stream drifts lower, brushing past your face before dissolving again. You inhale carefully and feel the dryness in your throat. It is not unbearable, but it is noticeable. A quiet presence that never quite leaves. A more unusual detail suggests that in some households smoke was not entirely unwelcome. It helped preserve wooden structures, deter insects, and even cure certain foods hung near the ceiling. In that sense, the smoky interior served more than one purpose, even if it came at a cost. You glance upward again, imagining strips of meat or herbs suspended in that hazy space, slowly drying, absorbing the scent of the fire. It makes sense. Nothing here is wasted. Historians still debate the long-term health effects of this constant smoke exposure, with some suggesting it contributed significantly to respiratory issues, while others argue that people may have adapted to a degree, developing a tolerance that allowed them to function despite the conditions. As you sit here blinking slowly, you find yourself somewhere in between those ideas. You can feel the discomfort, but you can also feel yourself adjusting. Your breathing becomes more measured. Your eyes blink less frequently. The irritation does not disappear, but it settles into something you can live with. You notice how no one else seems particularly troubled. They move through the space naturally, their eyes steady, their breathing calm. It is not that the smoke does not affect them, it is that they have learned to exist with it. The older woman leans back slightly, her face angled just enough to avoid the thickest part of the drifting haze. A small adjustment, almost invisible but clearly intentional. You begin to see these adjustments everywhere. A man shifts his position a few inches to the side. A child lowers their head slightly, keeping their face closer to the clearer air near the center. No one escapes the smoke completely, But everyone finds ways to manage it. You become more aware of the different layers of air in the room. Near the floor it is cooler, fresher. Closer to the fire, warmer, but mixed with faint smoke. Higher up, thicker, heavier, almost still. You instinctively lower your posture a little, bringing your face into that middle space where the balance feels most tolerable. It works, a little. The fire crackles softly, sending up another thin stream that twists and disappears into the dimness above. You follow it with your eyes watching as it merges into the larger haze. The smell becomes more distinct now. Wood, yes, but also something sharper. Soot. It settles lightly on surfaces, darkening the beams above, leaving faint traces along the walls. Over time, it builds layer upon layer, marking the passage of countless fires. You glance at your hands and imagine how they might carry that same scent after a full day here. It would linger, clinging to your skin, your clothes, a quiet reminder of the fire's constant presence. A small sound draws your attention as someone coughs softly across the room. It's not dramatic. Just a brief interruption quickly passed. No one reacts. It is as ordinary as the crackle of the fire itself. You begin to understand that comfort here is not about eliminating discomfort. It is about balancing it. Warmth comes with smoke. Light comes with soot. And the people here accept that exchange without question. You shift slightly, again noticing how your eyes have stopped watering as much. The sting is still there, but it has softened. Your body slowly is learning. Or perhaps simply tolerating. You take another careful breath, and this time it feels easier. Not clean, but familiar. You glance once more toward the upper part of the room where the smoke gathers and moves in slow, almost graceful patterns. It is strangely calming to watch, like a quiet current that never fully stops. Outside, the cold continues its steady pressure against the walls. Inside, the smoke hangs as a reminder that warmth is never simple. It carries a cost. But here that cost is understood, accepted, even used. And as you sit there, your breathing slow, your eyes half adjusted, you begin to feel the room settle again around you. The fire glows softly, the smoke drifts, the people remain, and the warmth, imperfect as it is, continues to hold. You linger in that steady half-light, your eyes now more comfortable with the smoke, your breathing slow and even when your attention shifts toward the far side of the room where the bedding lies prepared. It has been there all along, quietly waiting, almost blending into the background of daily life. Now it begins to matter. The fire continues its low, careful burn, but you can already sense that when the night deepens, it will not be enough on its own. The warmth it gives will fade with distance, and sleep will require something more contained. You rise slowly and move closer to the bedding area, feeling the subtle drop in temperature as you step away from the hearth. The air feels cooler here, thinner, less protected. It reminds you that warmth does not fill the room. It gathers in places. A widely accepted historical fact is that medieval beds were often layered structures built not for softness alone, but for insulation. Straw mattresses, wool blankets, feather-filled covers, and sometimes heavy curtains all work together to trap body heat during the night. You kneel slightly, looking more closely. The base layer appears to be a simple sack filled with straw. It is uneven, slightly lumpy, but thick enough to lift the sleeper off the cold ground. On top of it, you notice additional layers. Cloth-woven blankets, perhaps filled with wool or feathers, depending on what the household could afford. You press your hand lightly into it. It gives just enough. Not luxurious, but purposeful. A more obscure detail suggests that in some homes, especially those with slightly more resources, beds were designed with enclosed frames and curtains that could be drawn around the sleeper, creating a small pocket of trapped warmth. Even a thin fabric barrier could reduce drafts and hold heat more effectively. You glance around and see a simple version of that in here. Not a full structure, but a hanging cloth nearby ready to be adjusted to shield against the cold that drifts through the room at night. Historians still argue whether these enclosed sleeping arrangements were primarily about warmth, privacy, or status, but standing here, feeling the cooler air at the edge of the room, it becomes clear that warmth must have been a major factor. You imagine lying here, the fire behind you, the walls breathing faint cold through their small gaps, the night stretching long and still, and then the difference that these layers would make. You watch as someone approaches the bedding and begins to adjust it. They shake out a blanket, slightly smoothing it, then fold another layer over. The movements are calm, practiced, almost rhythmic. No one rushes into sleep. It is prepared. You notice how the bedding is not arranged for a single person alone. There is space, yes, but not much. It is meant to be shared. Bodies close together, reducing the amount of exposed surface, keeping warmth contained. You feel a quiet realization settle in. Warmth here is not something you surround yourself with. It is something you create together. You lower yourself carefully beside the bedding, feeling the difference in the air. It is cooler than near the fire, but the layers beneath your hand still hold a faint residual warmth from earlier use. That surprises you. It lingers. A small trace of heat held within the materials themselves. You realize that these layers do not just trap warmth during the night. They remember it. A quieter, more unusual detail notes that straw mattresses needed regular changing as they would compress over time and lose some of their insulating ability. Fresh straw loosely packed provided better warmth and comfort, even if only for a while. You glance at the mattress, again, imagining how often it would need to be replaced, how much effort that would take, and how easily its effectiveness could fade if neglected. Everything here requires maintenance, even rest. The person adjusting the bedding now pulls a blanket over the child, tucking it carefully along the sides. Not tightly, but enough to reduce the flow of air. You notice how deliberate that is. Not just covering, sealing. You sit there for a moment longer, observing how the bedding becomes a different kind of hearth. Smaller, quieter, but just as important. The fire warms the room, or at least part of it. The bed warms the body, and the two must work together. You can almost feel what it will be like when you lie down. The initial chill as you settle in, the slow build of warmth as your body heat gathers beneath the layers. The way the cold air above remains but becomes less important as the space beneath the blankets changes. You place your hand once more on the top layer and leave it there for a moment. It is cool, but not empty. It is waiting. The fire crackles softly behind you and you glance back at it. Its glow feels more distant now, less dominant. You begin to understand that as night deepens, attention will shift. From fire to bed. From shared warmth in the open room to contained warmth beneath layers. The room itself may never become fully warm, but within these smaller spaces something closer to comfort can exist. You rise slowly again, stepping back slightly, giving space as others begin to prepare for rest. The movements are quiet, unspoken, but coordinated. Everyone knows what comes next. The fire will be reduced, the embers protected, the bodies gathered close, the blankets drawn tight, and through all of it warmth will be held, not perfectly, but carefully, enough to last until morning. You remain near the bedding for a while, watching how each small adjustment is made with quiet intention. Then, almost without thinking, your attention shifts back to the people themselves. Not just where they sit or sleep, but what they wear. It becomes obvious slowly that warmth here does not begin with the fire or the bed. It begins with the body. A widely accepted historical fact is that medieval clothing was typically layered, especially in colder seasons, with garments made from wool, linen, and sometimes fur, each chosen for its ability to retain heat rather than for fashion alone. You look more closely now, and you begin to see those layers everywhere. A man near the hearth adjusts his outer tunic, slightly revealing another layer beneath. Thicker, rougher, likely wool. His sleeves are long, extending past his wrists, and the fabric bunches slightly at the edges, trapping air. You notice how little skin is exposed. Hands sometimes, faces, but everything else is covered. You glance down at your own arms, imagining how quickly the cold would reach you without that protection. The fire warms the surface, but clothing holds that warmth in place. A more unusual detail suggests that some people wore sleeping caps at night, not for style, but because a significant amount of body heat is lost through the head. Covering it made a noticeable difference in how warm one could stay beneath blankets. You look again and see it. A soft cap worn loosely by one of the older figures in the room. It sits lightly but purposefully, another small decision shaped by experience. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood heat loss in a scientific sense, or whether their clothing choices were guided purely by tradition and observation. As you watch the careful layering and adjustments, it feels less like guesswork and more like quiet knowledge passed from one generation to the next. You shift your shoulders slightly, imagining what it would feel like to wear these layers. Not just one garment, but several. Each one adding weight, yes, but also creating small pockets of trapped air between them. Air that warms, air that stays. You notice how even inside no one removes too many layers. There is no clear division between indoor and outdoor clothing in the way you might expect. The cold does not respect walls enough to allow that kind of separation. What you wear outside you often keep intae, because the difference is not large enough to justify change. A child near the bedding pulls at their sleeve, slightly tucking their hands deeper into the fabric. A simple gesture but effective. Less exposento, eh? More retain warmth. You begin to see how a clothing becomes a kind of portable shelter, something you carry with you, adapting as you move through different parts of the room, different times of day. The fire warms one side of you. Your clothing protects the round. A quieter, lesser known detail notes that linen, often used for undergarments, was not particularly warm on its own, but it helped manage moisture, keeping sweat away from the skin and allowing outer layers like wool to insulate more effectively. Even this unseen layer plays a role. You imagine the full combination now. Linen close to the body, wool above it, perhaps fur in harsher conditions, each layer working with the others, not separately. You glance again at the older woman by the hearth. Her clothing is thicker, more worn but carefully maintained. The edges are reinforced, the fabric layered in places where wear is greatest. This is not clothing as decoration. This is clothing as survival. The fire shifts slightly and the light catches on the textures of the garments around you. You see the weave of wool, the softer folds of linen, the occasional patch where something has been repaired. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is purely aesthetic. You move your hand near your arm again, imagining the difference between bare skin and layered fabric. Even in this room, with the fire nearby, the air would pull heat away quickly without protection. Clothing slows that process, gives you time. You notice how even as people prepare for rest, they do not fully undress. Layers may be loosened, adjusted, but not removed entirely. To do so would mean starting from cold again when morning comes. And cold here is something you avoid whenever possible. A man sits down near the bedding and pulls his cloak around him more tightly. It is heavy, thick, slightly rough in appearance. You can almost feel its weight just by looking at it. But you also imagine the warmth it holds. A small space between fabric and body, air warmed by breath and movement, kept close. Historians sometimes discuss whether medieval people felt cold more intensely than we do today, or whether constant exposure made them more resilient. Watching this quiet, continuous attention to clothing, it seems that resilience was not about ignoring the cold. It was about working with it, layer by layer, moment by moment. You shift your stance, again becoming more aware of your own body in the space. The warmth you feel now is not just from the fire. It is from everything working together. The fire, the people, the walls, and the clothing that holds it all in place. You glance once more at the bedding, then back at the figures around you wrapped in their layers, moving slowly, preparing for the night. There is no single solution to the cold here, only many small ones. Combined, you take a slow breath and the air feels just a little warmer now against your skin. Or perhaps you're simply beginning to understand how to keep it that way. You remain standing for a moment, watching how each person adjusts their clothing, their position, their place in the room. Then your attention drifts outward again, away from the people and back toward the edges of the space. Toward the places where the cold enters. You notice the door first. It stands closed solid at a glance, but no longer convincing. You can see now how the edges do not meet perfectly. Small uneven gaps trace the outline, barely visible unless you're looking for them. And now you are. A widely accepted historical fact is that medieval doors and shutters were rarely sealed tightly, meaning drafts were a constant part of indoor life during colder months. Precision construction was difficult and materials shifted with time and weather, leaving small openings where air could pass through. You step closer, feeling it again. That thin movement of air, not strong, not dramatic, but steady. It slips along the bottom of the door and brushes against your feet. Cold, quiet, persistent. Someone has already placed a piece of cloth there, tucked loosely along the base. You crouch slightly and see how it bunches unevenly, filling some of the gap, but not all of it. It helps, but it does not stop the cold entirely. A more unusual detail suggests that in some households, people used whatever materials they had to block drafts, including old clothing, straw bundles, or even animal skins pressed against doors and windows. These makeshift solutions varied widely, but all aimed to sow the steady intrusion of winter air. You straighten again and glance toward the small window opening on the far wall. It is covered but not with glass as you would expect. Instead, a simple wooden shutter is pulled across with a thin layer of material behind it, perhaps cloth or oil parchment. It lets in almost no light and very little protection. Historians still debate how effective such coverings were, especially in harsher climates, with some suggesting they offered minimal insulation, while others argue that even a small barrier could make a meaningful difference when combined with other measures. As you stand here feeling the faint cold slipping through every imperfect seam, it becomes clear that effectiveness is relative. Nothing here is perfect. Everything is partial. You move along the wall, slowly placing your hand near the surface again. In some places it feels slightly warmer where the fire's influence reaches. In others it is cooler where the wall meets the outside more directly. You notice how the people in the room avoid these colder spots without thinking. No one leans against the wall for long. No one settles near the door unless necessary. The space is used with awareness. The warmer centre draws everyone inward. The colder edges are left mostly empty. You glance down at the floor again. The rushes are thicker near the hearth, thinner near the walls. It is subtle but intentional. More insulation where people gather, less where they do not linger. A faint sound comes from the window as the wind shifts outside. The shutter trembles slightly, not enough to open, but enough to remind you of what lies beyond it. You imagine the cold pressing against it, testing it, waiting. Inside the response is quiet but constant. Small adjustments. A cloth moved. A bundle placed. A position changed. You watch as someone rises and walks toward the door, pressing the cloth more firmly into place with their foot. They do not check it once and forget it. They check it again and again, as if the cold might return the moment they stop paying attention. You begin to understand that it will. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that hanging textiles along walls or across doorways could also help reduce drafts, even if only slightly. These layers, while simple, created small pockets of still air that slowed the movement of cold. You look at it again and notice a hanging cloth near one corner of the room. It does not cover much, but it shifts gently, marking a boundary where the air feels just a little different. You step closer to it and pause. The difference is subtle, but real. You can feel how even a thin barrier changes the flow of air, softening the edge of the cold. It is not enough on its own, but it contributes. Everything here contributes. Historians sometimes question how much comfort medieval homes could realistically provide given these limitations. Some argue that daily life must have been dominated by discomfort, while others suggest that people adapted so fully that it became normal. Standing here feeling the constant interplay between warmth and cold, you begin to see both sides. It is not comfortable in the way you are used to, but it is livable, managed. You step back toward the centre of the room, again drawn once more toward the hearth. The difference is immediate. The air softens. The cold recedes just enough to ease your awareness of it. You glance once more at the door, the window, the walls. They are not barriers that stop the cold. They are filters, slowing it, buying time, giving the people inside a chance to respond. The fire continues its quiet work behind you. The people remain close together. The layers of clothing hold warmth in place, and the small defences along the edges of the room stand as a final line. Not perfect, but persistent. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmer air fill your lungs again as you return fully to the centre. And as the wind shifts outside, pressing faintly against the walls, you understand something clearly now. Staying warm here is not about one solution. It is about many small ones, working together, holding the cold at bay. Peace, peace. You ease back toward the hearth again, drawn by that familiar pull of warmth. And as you settle into place, your attention shifts to something you had only half noticed before. The pot. It hangs just above the fire. Steady, darkened from long use, its surface carrying the same layer of soot that marks everything in this room. A faint steam rises from it, soft and constant, blending into the smoky air above. At first, it seems like part of the background. Then you begin to understand. A widely accepted historical fact is that in many medieval households, cooking was done directly over the hearth with pots suspended or placed close to the flames, allowing meals to be prepared slowly over long periods. This was not just about food, it was about heat. You lean slightly closer and feel it. A different kind of warmth. Not the sharp, flickering heat of flame, but a softer, lingering warmth that spreads outward from the pot itself. It radiates gently, filling the space just above the fire with something more stable. You inhale slowly, and the air carries a faint scent now. Broth, perhaps. Something simple, something that's been cooking for a long time. It is not strong, not overwhelming, but it adds another layer to the atmosphere of the room. Warmth you can smell. A more unusual detail suggests that in some households, large cauldrons were kept simmering for extended periods with ingredients added gradually throughout the day, creating a kind of continuous stew. This practice not only provided food, but also ensured that the fire remained active and the surrounding area stayed warm. You watch as someone approaches the pot, lifting the lid slightly and stirring its contents with a long wooden utensil. The movement releases a brief cloud of steam that rises and then disappears into the haze above. For a moment, the air feels warmer, moist, different from the dry, smoky warmth of the fire alone. Historians still debate how much this cooking heat contributes to overall warmth in the home, with some suggesting it played a meaningful role in maintaining a livable environment, while others argue that its effect was limited to the immediate area around the hearth. As you sit here feeling that gentle shift in the air, it seems clear that even if the effect is small, it matters. Everything here matters. You notice how the act of cooking itself keeps people near the fire. It draws attention, movement, purpose. No one leaves the hearth unattended while food is being prepared. And in staying close, they remain warm. You glance down and see a small flat surface near the edge of the fire where something else is being heated. Perhaps bread, perhaps something wrapped in cloth or placed directly on a heated stone. The heat from the fire does not go unused. It is directed, shared. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that heated stones were sometimes used to retain warmth, even after being removed from the fire, placed near bedding or held close to the body for additional heat. You imagine one of those stones now tucked beneath a blanket, slowly releasing the heat it absorbed. It makes sounds and it makes sense. The fire gives. The materials around it hold. You watch as a piece of wood shifts slightly in the hearth, sending a brief flicker of flame upward. The pot responds with a soft sound, a gentle bubbling that seems almost rhythmic. It is calming, predictable. You realize that cooking here is not separate from heating. It is part of it. The same fire that prepares food also keeps the room from slipping fully into cold. The same pot that feeds the family also adds a layer of warmth to the air. Nothing is isolated. Everything overlaps. You shift your position slightly, bringing your hands closer to the pot rather than the flames. The warmth is different here. Less intense, but more even. It spreads across your skin without the sharp contrast you felt before. You linger there for a moment. It feels steady, sustained. You notice how the people around you seem to move in a pattern that keeps them within reach of both the fire and the food. Someone stirs, someone adjusts the wood, someone checks the bread. Each action, small, but together they maintain both warmth and nourishment. You glance again at the pot, watching the steam rise and vanish. It reminds you of something fleeting. Heat that exists only for a moment before blending into the room, but enough of it over time changes the space. Historians sometimes explore how daily routines like cooking shape the structure of medieval life, not just socially but physically influencing where people gathered and how spaces were used. Sitting here now, it becomes clear that the hearth is not just a place. It is a system, a centre where heat, food, light and activity all come together. You listen to the quiet sounds again, the soft bubbling of the pot, the faint crackle of the fire, the low murmur of voices continuing around you. Everything feels connected. You take a slow breath and the warmth seems to settle deeper now, not just on your skin but within you. The scent of the food, the heat of the fire, the presence of others. It all works together. The cold is still there, beyond the walls, at the edges of the room, but here near the hearth, near the pot, near the steady rhythm of cooking and fire, it feels held back. Managed. You lower your hands, slightly resting them in your lap, and watch as another small adjustment is made to the fire. The pot shifts, the steam rises, the warmth continues, and as you sit there quietly observing, you begin to understand that even something as simple as a meal is part of the larger effort to stay warm, to stay steady, to carry through the night. You remain close to the hearth, your senses now tuned to the steady rhythm of heat, smoke, and quiet movement when your attention shifts again. Not to any single object this time, but to the flow of activity itself. Nothing here is idle for long. Even in this calm evening, there is work continuing in small, almost invisible ways. A widely accepted historical fact is that survival during medieval winters depended heavily on continuous daily labour, especially tasks like gathering fuel, maintaining shelter, and preparing food. Warmth was not something stored in abundance. It was sustained through effort repeated over and over again. You glance toward the stack of wood near the wall. It is not large, not enough to feel secure for long. Each piece represents time spent outside in the cold, cutting, carrying, returning. You imagine the path taken to gather it, the sharp air, the weight of each bundle, the need to move quickly but not waste energy. A man near the hearth stands and selects another piece, turning it in his hands before setting it aside for later use. Not yet, not until it is needed. The decision is small but deliberate. Nothing is burned without thought. A more unusual detail suggests that in some regions, families relied not only on wood, but also on peat or dried animal dung as fuel, especially where forests were scarce. These materials burned differently, sometimes producing more smoke, but offering a steady, reliable heat source. You look at the fire again, wondering what kind of fuel feeds it now. The smell carries a hint of earthiness beneath the smoke, something slightly different from clean wood. It makes you realize that warmth here is not just about having fuel. It is about adapting to what is available. Historians still debate how severe fuel shortages could become during particularly harsh winters, with some evidence suggesting that families were forced to ration heat carefully, while other accounts imply that communities developed systems of sharing and trade to manage scarcity. As you sit here watching how carefully each piece of fuel is handled, it becomes clear that even in ordinary times, nothing is taken for granted. You notice another movement across the room. Someone kneels near the floor, adjusting the layer of straw, redistributing it slightly where it has thinned. It is a small act, easy to overlook, but it changes how the cold from the ground is felt. Even the floor is maintained. You begin to understand that warmth is not a single task completed once. It's a series of small tasks repeated constantly. You shift your gaze toward the door again, remembering the cloth placed there earlier. It has slipped slightly, leaving a narrow gap. Almost immediately, someone notices and presses it back into place. No words, just action. The cold is always testing, and the response is always ready. A quieter, lesser known detail notes that roofs also required regular attention during winter, as accumulated snow or damage could allow cold air or moisture to enter, reducing the effectiveness of the entire structure. Even above your head there is work being done, even if not visible at this moment. You glance upward, imagining the weight of snow resting on the roof, the slow pressure it applies, and the need to keep that barrier intact. The house is not a finished object. It is an ongoing effort. You shift slightly, feeling the warmth of the fire again, and realize how much work lies behind even this simple comfort. Every piece of fuel, every adjustment of straw, every repair to wall or roof, all of it contributes. A child near the bedding stirs and sits up briefly, adjusting their blanket before settling again. Even this small movement is part of the pattern, keeping warmth close, preventing it from slipping away. You notice how no one moves carelessly. Every action seems shaped by an awareness of energy, not just physical energy, but the energy of heat itself. What is gained? What is lost? What must be preserved? Historians often describe medieval life as labour-intensive, but sitting here you begin to feel what that means in a more immediate way. It is not just work in the fields or in trade. It is work in every moment. To maintain comfort, to avoid cold, to keep the fire alive. You lean back slightly, letting your shoulders relax. but even in rest you can sense the quiet continuation of effort around you. Someone checks the fire, someone adjusts their clothing, someone shifts closer to another person. Nothing stops, it only slows. The fire gives a soft crackle, and a small piece of wood collapses inward, sending a brief flicker of light across the room. You watch as someone immediately responds, adjusting it, ensuring the burn continues evenly. There is no delay, no hesitation. You begin to understand that this constant attention is what allows the room to feel as steady as it does. Without it, the warmth would fade quickly. The cold would return. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth in your chest, the slight dryness in the air, the quiet presence of others continuing their small tasks. This is how winter is managed, not through a single solution, but through continuous care, through effort that never fully stops. And as you sit there watching the subtle movements that keep everything in balance, you realize that even this calm, almost peaceful evening is built on work, invisible, unspoken, but essential. The fire glows, the room holds, because someone is always doing something. You sit a little longer, letting the steady rhythm of small tasks settle around you, and your attention shifts again. Not to the fire or the walls or the door this time, to the people themselves, more specifically to how differently each one seems to respond to the cold. A widely accepted historical fact is that certain groups in medieval households, especially young children, the elderly and the sick, were more vulnerable to cold conditions and often required additional care to stay warm. You begin to notice this now in quiet, subtle ways. The child near the bedding is already wrapped more securely than anyone else. The blanket is tucked more carefully, the edges pressed in tighter to keep warmth from escaping. Their small body seems to disappear beneath the layers. You watch as an older figure leans over, adjusting the covering, slightly checking without waking them. It is not a dramatic gesture, just careful, intentional. You glance across the room and notice another figure older, moving more slowly than the others. Their posture is slightly bent, their movements deliberate, as if conserving energy with every step. They settle closer to the hearth than most, closer than you have seen others sit. Not too close to risk the fire, but close enough to draw as much warmth as possible. A more unusual detail suggests that in some households the most vulnerable members were given priority positions near the fire or the warmest sleeping areas, even if it meant others accepted slightly colder conditions. Warmth, like food, could be distributed according to need. You watch this arrangement now, seeing how it forms without discussion. No one announces it, no one questions it. It simply happened. Historians still debate how consistently such care was provided across different households and social classes, with some evidence suggesting strong family bonds ensured protection, while other accounts hint that hardship could sometimes limit how much help could be given. As you observe this quiet attention, it feels clear that at least here care is present, even if resources are limited. You shift slightly, noticing how your own position relative to the fire has changed again. The warmth feels stronger now, but you are aware that others might need it more. You lean back just a little, giving space without drawing attention to it. No one comments, but the balance adjusts. A child stirs again, shifting beneath the blankets, and a hand reaches out instinctively to steady them. The movement is soft, almost automatic. Protection here is not loud. It is constant. You notice how the older woman by the hearth keeps her attention divided. One moment on the fire, the next on the people around her, watching, adjusting, anticipating. Her role is not defined in words, but it is clear. You glance toward the bedding again and see that the smallest figures are placed toward the center of the group, surrounded by others. Not at the edges where the cold is stronger, but within the most protected space. The arrangement itself creates warmth. Layers of bodies, layers of care. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that in some cases illness during winter was believed to be influenced by cold air entering the body, leading families to cover the vulnerable more thoroughly and limit exposure to drafts as much as possible. You watch as someone adjusts a cloth near the door again, pressing it tighter, as if responding to a change no one has spoken aloud. The cold is not just uncomfortable, it is a threat, and it is treated as such. You become more aware of how the room is organized now, not randomly, but with a quiet intention. The strongest, the most active move more freely. The more fragile remain closer to warmth, more protected, more still. You feel a shift into your understanding. Warmth here is not equal. It is shared, but also directed, given where it is most needed. Historians sometimes question how families balanced fairness and survival in difficult conditions, and whether hard choices had to be made when resources were scarce. Sitting here, you can sense that balance even if you do not see its extremes. There is care, but there is also limitation. You watch as the older figure near the fire extends their hands, slightly absorbing the heat, then slowly lowers them again as if pacing their exposure. Even warmth must be managed. Too much at once and the contrast with the surrounding cold becomes sharper. Too little and it's not enough. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth against your face, the cooler air at your back, and the presence of others around you. Each person experiences this room differently. Each body holds heat in its own way. Each life here depends on finding the right balance. You notice again how no one speaks about it. No one explains it. And yet everything is understood. A blanket adjusted, a seat given up, a place near the fire quietly offered. Small acts, constant. You glance once more at the sleeping child, now still again, their breathing steady beneath the layers. They are warm, protected, for now. And as you sit there watching the quiet care that moves through the room, you begin to understand something deeper. Staying warm is not just a physical task. It is a social one, a shared responsibility shaped by attention, awareness, and quiet decisions. The fire continues to glow. The room holds steady, and within it warmth is guided where it is needed most. You remain seated, quietly observing the careful distribution of warmth among the people when something else begins to register. A different kind of presence in the room, subtle at first, then unmistakable. A soft shifting sound, a faint earthy smell layered beneath the smoke. You turn your head slightly and notice movement near the edge of the space. Not human this time, animals. A widely accepted historical fact is that in some medieval households, particularly in rural areas, animals such as chickens, goats, or even small livestock were kept inside or very close to living spaces during winter, both for protection and indirectly for warmth. You watch as a small animal, perhaps a goat or something similar, shifts its weight, settling down again on a patch of straw near the wall. It does not seem out of place. No one reacts. Its presence is simply part of the room. At first the idea feels strange, but then you begin to understand. The animal's body gives off heat, not much, but enough to matter in a space where every small contribution counts. A more unusual detail suggests that in some regions homes were deliberately designed with shared walls or connected spaces between human living areas and animal shelters, allowing warmth from livestock to pass through and slightly raise indoor temperatures. You glance toward the wall behind the animal and imagine what lies beyond it. Perhaps more animals, perhaps a small enclosed space where their combined warmth lingers. Historians still debate how widespread this practice was and how effective it truly was in improving indoor warmth, with some suggesting it was more about convenience and protection of animals than intentional heating, while others argue that the thermal benefit, even if modest, was well understood. As you sit here feeling the layered warmth of the room, it becomes easier to believe that even a small addition would be valued. You notice how the animal settles deeper into the straw. It is breathing slow, steady. The same rhythm you observed in the people, a quiet coexistence. The smell becomes clearer now, not unpleasant but distinct. Earthy, animal, mixed with the smoke and the scent of food, it forms another layer of the room's atmosphere. You take a slow breath, adjusting to it. It becomes part of the whole. You glance around and see how the animals are placed toward the edges, not at the center, but still within the shelter of the walls. Close enough to benefit from the shared warmth, but not interfering with the main space. The arrangement feels deliberate, balanced. A quieter, lesser, a known detail notes that chickens were sometimes kept indoors during harsh weather to ensure egg production continued as cold conditions could reduce their laying. This practical need brought them even closer into human living spaces. You imagine the small movements, the occasional sounds, the presence of life beyond just the human. It changes the room, not just physically, but emotionally. There is a sense of fullness here, a shared survival. You notice how no one seems bothered by it. The animals are not treated as separate in the way you might expect. They are part of the household, contributing in their own way. You shift slightly and feel the warmth of the room again, now understanding it as something even more layered. Fire! Bodies, clothing, walls, and now animals, each adding something, each small but together enough. Historians sometimes explore how closely humans and animals lived during this period, questioning whether this proximity shaped daily life health and even emotional bonds in ways that are difficult to fully understand today. Sitting here, it feels less like a question and more like a reality. You hear a faint sound again, a soft rustle as another animal shifts position. No one looks up, no one comments. It is part of the background, like the fire, like the wind outside. You glance towards the door again, then back to the animal near the wall. You imagine the difference if it were not here. The space would feel emptier, colder, even if only slightly. And in this environment, slight differences matter. You rest your hands together, feeling the warmth held between them, and let your gaze settle across the room. Everything here is working together, not perfectly, but effectively. You begin to see the household not just as a group of people, but as a small system, each part contributing to the whole, each presence adding something that helps hold the cold back. The fire remains at the center, but it is not alone. You take another slow breath, the air now familiar layered with smoke warmth and that faint animal scent that no longer feels out of place. Outside, the cold continues its steady pressure. Inside, life gathers, human and animal, still, close, sharing warmth in whatever ways they can. And as you sit there watching the quiet coexistence unfold, you understand something else. Warmth here is not just created, it is accumulated, piece by piece, body by body, until it becomes enough to carry everyone through the night. You remain where you are, letting the quiet presence of both people and animals settle into something familiar. When your thoughts begin to stretch beyond this single room, you start to wonder, is this the same everywhere? A widely accepted historical fact is that living conditions in the medieval world varied greatly depending on wealth, status and location, with the castles, monasteries and simple cottages all offering very different experiences of winter. You glance around this modest space again. The low ceiling, the central hearth, the shared bedding, the careful layering of warmth. It is functional, thoughtful, but also limited. You imagine slowly what it might be like elsewhere. In a large stone castle, for example. At first it sounds warmer, stronger walls, greater resources, but then you picture it more clearly. Vast halls, high ceilings, thick stone that holds cold just as easily as it holds structure. The fire would still burn, but the space it must warm would be enormous. A more unusual detail suggests that in many castles only certain rooms were actively heated during winter, while others remained cold and unused. Large great halls might have central hearths, but the warmth often struggled to reach beyond the immediate area. You imagine yourself standing in such a hall, the fire roaring larger than the one here, but the cold lingering at the edges untouched. Historians still debate whether castle life in winter was truly more comfortable than that of common households, with some arguing that wealth allowed for better materials and resources, while others point out that the scale of these structures often made them difficult to heat effectively. You return your focus to the room you're in now. Small, contained, easier to manage. You begin to see that size itself changes everything. A smaller space concentrates warmth, a larger one disperses it. You shift your gaze again, imagining another setting. A monastery, quiet-ordered, structured. Their warmth would be regulated differently. Fires maintained in specific areas. Communal spaces used at set times. Perhaps more discipline in how heat is shared. A lesser-known detail notes that in some monastic communities, strict rules govern the use of fire, with limitations placed on how much warmth individuals could seek, reflecting values of simplicity and endurance. You imagine sitting in such a place, the cold present but accepted, not resisted in the same way but endured as part of daily life. It feels different, not less cold, but differently understood. Historians sometimes question how religious beliefs shaped attitudes toward physical comfort, including warmth, suggesting that in some contexts enduring cold was seen as a form of discipline or devotion. You sit with that idea for a moment, feeling the warmth of the fire on your hands and wondering what it would mean to choose less of it. Then your thoughts return again. to cottages like this one. You realize that while resources here are limited, the space is adaptable. Every part of it is used. Every adjustment matters. There is a kind of efficiency in its simplicity. You glance at the hearth again, then at the bedding, the walls, the door. Everything is close, everything within reach. A quieter, more obscure detail suggests that even within villages, differences in wealth could affect how well a household stayed warm, with some able to afford better fuel, thicker clothing, or more frequent repairs, while others struggled with less. You imagine two homes side by side, one with slightly thicker blankets, slightly more fuel, slightly fewer drafts. The difference would not be dramatic, but it would be felt. You shift your weight slightly, becoming more aware of how even small variations could change the experience of winter. A little more warmth, a little less cold, a little more comfort, or not. Historians continue to explore how these differences shape daily life, questioning whether the gap between wealth and poverty in winter conditions was sharp or gradual. Sitting here, it feels gradual, layered, not a single divide, but many small ones. Blondies. You take a slow breath, letting the warmth settle again around you. This room is not the warmest possible, but it is enough. And in many ways, that may have mattered more than anything else. You glance once more at the people around you, the way they move, the way they adjust, the way they share the space. This is not just a physical environment. It is a practiced one, refined over time, shaped by need. You imagine stepping into a castle again, then back here. The contrast feels less simple now, not better or worse. Just different. Each space with its own challenges, each with its own solution. You lower your gaze towards the fire, watching its steady glow, and realize something quietly important. Warmth in the medieval world was not defined by architecture alone. It was defined by how people used it, how they adapted, how they worked within the limits of what they had. And as you sit there in this small, carefully managed space, you begin to understand that even in a world of great differences, the same principles apply. Fire, closeness, layering, attention, wherever you go. The cold remains, and so does the need to hold it back. You sit quietly for a moment, letting your thoughts drift through castles and monasteries before returning fully to the room around you. The fire continues its steady glow. The people remain close, the small sounds of movement and breath blending into something calm. Then your attention shifts again to water, or rather the absence of it. A widely accepted historical fact is that regular bathing in the medieval period was far less common than in modern life, especially during winter, when heating large amounts of water was labour-intensive and exposure to cold air after washing could be dangerous. You imagine it for a moment, stepping away from the fire, removing layers of clothing, introducing water into that carefully balanced warmth. The thought alone feels uncomfortable. You glance around and notice that no one here seems freshly washed in the way you might expect. Their appearance is not unclean, but it reflects a different approach to hygiene. Practical, managed, adapted to the environment. A more unusual detail suggests that when bathing did occur, it was often done with heated water brought to a tub or basin, sometimes shared among multiple people rather than in a continuously running supply. The process required planning effort and careful timing. You picture the sequence now. Water drawn, carried, heated over the fire, poured into a container, used quickly before it cools. Every step tied to the same limited resource, heat. Historians still debate how frequently people bathed in different regions and periods, with some arguing that bathing was more common than often assumed, while others believe that in colder climates and harsher conditions it was reduced significantly during winter months. As you sit here feeling the delicate balance of warmth in the room, it becomes easier to understand why. Any disruption could matter. You shift slightly, pulling your arms closer to your body, and imagine the sensation of wet skin in this air. Even near the fire, the warmth is not constant enough to fully protect you. Drying would take time, and during that time the cold would return. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that in some cases heated stones were placed in water to warm it, or even wrapped in cloth and brought into bedding areas to provide localized heat for washing or comfort. You imagine one of those stones, now glowing faintly, placed carefully near a basin, a small attempt to extend warmth beyond the fire. It fits the pattern you've been seeing. Small solutions, layered together. You notice how clothing which you observed earlier plays a role here as well. Layers can be removed and replaced gradually, allowing some degree of cleaning without full exposure. Hands washed, faces wiped. Selective care. You watch as someone near the hearth dips a cloth into a small container and gently wipes their hands, then their face. The movement is slow, deliberate. The cloth is warm, or at least not cold. It is enough, not a full bath, but a form of maintenance. Historians sometimes explore how medieval people balanced cleanliness with the risks of cold exposure, suggesting that practical choices often took precedence over ideals. Watching this quiet act, it becomes clear that cleanliness here is not ignored. It is adapted. You glance again at the fire, then at the bedding, then at the walls. Everything is connected. Heat, water, clothing, each influencing the other. You imagine a larger bathing space, perhaps in a town or a wealthier household where more resources might allow for more frequent washing, but even there the same principles would apply. Heat must be created, maintained, protected. You take a slow breath, feeling the dryness of the air again, and realize that in this environment, dryness itself is part of staying warm. Moisture, once introduced, becomes something to manage carefully. Too much and it draws heat away. Too little and the body feels different. Everything is a balance. You notice how no one lingers far from the fire while using water. The small acts of washing happen within its reach, within its protection. Even then they are brief, efficient. A small pause follows as the cloth is set aside, the hands warmed again near the fire, the moisture driven off by the heat. You watch the steam rise faintly from the cloth, disappearing into the smoky air above. Another small layer added, another moment of warmth used carefully. Historians still question how these daily practices shaped people's perception of comfort and cleanliness, and whether modern expectations would feel excessive or unnecessary in such conditions. Sitting here, it feels clear that priorities shift when survival is involved. Warmth comes first. Everything else adjusts around it. You lower your hands into your lap again, feeling the warmth settle back into your skin, and let your gaze drift across the room. The fire continues. The people remain. The balance holds, and even something as simple as washing becomes part of the larger effort. To stay warm, to stay steady, to move through winter without losing that fragile essential comfort. You sit quietly, letting the warmth settle again after the brief thought of water and cold skin when the room begins to shift in a subtle way. Not in light, not in sound, but in feeling. Night is deepening. The fire has been lowered slightly, its flame smaller, now its glow more contained. The shadows stretch further across the walls and the voices in the room have softened even more, settling into something close to silence. You remain awake, watching, listening. A widely accepted historical fact is that nights in medieval households were often divided into periods of rest and quiet wakefulness, especially during winter, when long hours of darkness shaped daily rhythms. Sleep was not always a single uninterrupted stretch. You notice it now. Someone shifts in the bedding. Another figure near the hearth leans forward, adjusting the embers with slow, careful movements. No one fully leaves the world of the waking. Even in rest, tension remains. You glance toward the door again. The cloth is still in place, but you can see it move slightly as the wind presses from outside. The sound is faint but constant. A low, almost rhythmic pressure. You listen to it for a moment. It feels closer at night, more present. A more unusual detail suggests that in some regions people believed that the cold night air carried not just physical chill but unseen forces or influences, leading them to be especially cautious about drafts after dark. You can almost understand why. In the stillness of night, every small sensation feels sharper, more personal. Historians still debate how widespread such beliefs were and how much they influenced daily behaviour, but as you sit here aware of every movement of air, it becomes easy to imagine how the cold itself could feel like something more than just temperature. You shift slightly, pulling your arms closer to your body even though you are still near the fire. The warmth is there, but the awareness of the cold has grown. You glance toward the bedding again. Most are now lying down, their forms still beneath the layered coverings. Only a few remain upright, watching the fire, tending to it, guarding it. A quieter, lesser, Known detail notes that in some households someone might remain partially awake or rise during the night to check the fire, ensuring that it did not die out completely before morning. You watch as the older woman leans forward again, gently stirring the embers, then covering part of them with ash, protecting them. The flames dim further, but the glow beneath strengthens. It is a careful trade. Less light, more endurance. You listen to the room now, the fire quieter than before, the breathing of those asleep soft and steady, the occasional shift of straw beneath a resting body, and beyond it all the wind. You feel the space differently at night, smaller, more enclosed. The edges seem further away, the centre more important. You lower yourself slowly, settling closer to the bedding, not yet lying down, but no longer fully upright. The warmth feels closer here, more contained. You can feel the heat held beneath the blankets, even from where you sit. A small movement catches your attention as someone adjusts their covering, pulling it tighter, tucking it beneath their side. No words, just instinct. Historians sometimes explore how the long winter nights shape not only sleep patterns, but also the emotional experience of the season, suggesting that darkness and cold together created a heightened awareness of the home as a place of safety. Sitting here, it feels true. The room is not just shelter, it is protection. You glance once more toward the door, then back to the fire, then to the people around you. Everything feels closer. More important, you take a slow breath, the air warm but dry, carrying the familiar scent of smoke. Your eyes feel heavier now. The rhythm of the room is slower, calmer. You notice how even those still awake move more gently, as if not to disturb the balance that has been built. The fire gives a soft, almost fading crackle. The embers glow steadily. You shift slightly and feel the warmth of the bedding beneath your hand again. It draws you, a small space of contained heat, waiting. You lower yourself further, finally settling down among the others, pulling a layer over yourself. The initial touch is cool, then slowly, almost imperceptibly, it begins to change. Your own heat gathers, held in place, protected. You listen one last time. The fire, the breath of those around you, the wind outside, and as you lie there wrapped in layers, surrounded by quiet presence, you understand something clearly. Night is not a time when warmth is forgotten. It is a time when it must be held most carefully, guarded, preserved. Until morning, you lie there for a while, feeling the slow gathering of warmth beneath the layers when a new thought begins to form. It starts quietly, almost like a question at the edge of your awareness. What happens when there is not enough? A widely accepted historical fact is that fuel shortages were a recurring challenge during medieval winters, especially in regions where wood was scarce or access to resources was limited by geography, ownership, or harsh weather conditions. You feel the warmth around you now, small but steady, and it suddenly feels more fragile. Dependent. You imagine the stack of wood you saw earlier, not as it is now, but reduced, smaller, nearly gone, each piece used more carefully, each decision weighed. A more unusual detail suggests that in some areas strict rules governed the collection of firewood, especially in forests owned by nobles or communities, meaning that ordinary families could not always gather as much fuel as they needed without permission. You picture it, the forest close by, full of wood, and yet not fully available. Historians still debate how severe these restrictions were in practice, with some evidence suggesting that people often found ways around them, while other accounts indicate that access could be tightly controlled, especially in more structured societies. As you lie here, feeling the warmth slowly building beneath the blankets, you begin to understand what it would mean if that warmth had to be limited. You shift slightly, pulling the covering closer instinctively, reducing the space where heat could escape. Even this small act feels more important now. You glance toward the hearth. The fire is lower, more contained. The embers hold their glow, but there is less flame. You can almost sense the decision behind it, not to burn more than necessary, to make it last. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that peat, often used as alternative fuel, burned more slowly than wood and could provide a longer-lasting heat, though sometimes with more smoke and less immediate warmth. You imagine the difference. A slower burn, a steadier glow. Perhaps more suited to long nights where preservation matters more than intensity. You listen to the room again. The breathing is steady, the movements minimal. Even in sleep, the awareness of warmth continues. You notice how no one has thrown off their coverings. No one has drifted far from the shared space. Everything remains contained. Efficient. Historians sometimes explore how families adjusted their routines during periods of scarcity, suggesting that activities might be reduced, movement minimized, and time spent closer together to conserve both energy and heat. Lying here, it feels natural. Why move if movement exposes you to cold? Why waste heat if it takes so much to build it? You feel your own body settling more deeply into the bedding, your movement slowing, your breathing matching the quiet rhythm of the room. Even rest becomes part of the strategy. You imagine a colder night, one where the fuel is nearly gone, the fire barely glowing, the room colder than this. How would it feel? You picture the same arrangement, bodies closer, layers tighter, the smallest sources of warmth valued even more. A child shifts beside you, drawing closer without waking fully. The movement is instinctive, seeking warmth without thought. You allow it, and in that moment you feel the shared heat increase even slightly, enough to notice. A small difference, but meaningful. Historians still question how often families faced extreme shortages and how they managed to endure them, with some accounts describing resilience and adaptation, while others hint at the real hardship such conditions could bring. You lie with that thought for a moment, feeling the warmth you have now and imagining it slipping away. It changes how you experience it, makes it feel less like a given, more like something held carefully. You glance again toward the hearth. The embers continue their quiet glow, still alive, still enough, for now. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth beneath the blankets, the cooler air above, and the presence of others close around you. Everything feels balanced, but delicately so. You realize that warmth here is not guaranteed. It is maintained, and sometimes it must be stretched, made to last longer than it naturally would. Through careful use, through restraint, through shared effort, you settle your head more comfortably, letting your body relax further into the warmth that has gathered. It is not abundant, but it is enough, and as you lie there aware of how easily it could be, otherwise you begin to understand something quietly important. Warmth in this world is not just created, it is protected, especially when there is not quite enough to go around. You remain still beneath the blankets, your body slowly settling into the warmth you have helped create when something else begins to rise into your awareness. Not cold, not heat, but something softer, a shift in mood. A widely accepted historical fact is that winter in medieval communities was often marked by seasonal gatherings, feasts and religious observances, especially during periods like midwinter festivals, which brought people together during the coldest and darkest part of the year. You can almost feel that presence here now, not as a loud celebration, but as a quiet memory of it, a different kind of warmth. You imagine this same room not in this hushed late hour, but earlier in the season, the fire burning brighter, more voices filling the space, the pot over the hearth fuller, richer, the air carrying not just the scent of simple food, but something more prepared, more intentional. A more unusual detail suggests that candles and small oil lamps were often used during such gatherings, adding not just light, but a faint additional warmth to enclosed spaces, even if minimal. The combined effect of many small flames could subtly change the atmosphere. You picture them now. Points of light scattered around the room, flickering gently, each one adding something small but together creating a sense of fullness. Historians still debate how much these seasonal gatherings affected overall well-being, with some suggesting they played a significant role in maintaining morale during harsh winters, while others argue their impact was limited by the realities of scarcity and labour demands. As you lie here, you begin to understand that even if the physical warmth added was small, the emotional warmth may have mattered just as much. You listen to the quiet breathing around you and imagine it replaced by soft conversation laughter, shared stories. The same people, the same space, but transformed. You feel a slight shift beside you as someone adjusts their position in sleep, and for a moment the shared warmth increases again. It reminds you that even now in Sinensis the presence of others continues to matter. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that certain winter festivals were timed around the agricultural calendar, marking a pause in outdoor labour and allowing communities to gather indoors more frequently than at other times of the year. You imagine those moments. More people in this room, more bodies, more heat, the fire working harder, the space more full, warmer. You can almost hear it, the low hum of voices, the movement of people, the subtle increase in temperature as the room fills. Historians sometimes explore whether these gatherings were essential not just socially but physically helping people endure winter by bringing them together in shared spaces where warmth could be concentrated. Lying here, it feels likely. Warmth grows with presence, with closeness, with shared time. You take a slow breath, feeling the air move gently across your face and imagine it carrying not just smoke, but the faint scent of richer food of candles of many people gathered together. A different atmosphere, but the same purpose. Viscous. To hold the colder air imperceptible. You notice how even now in this quieter moment the structure of that idea remains. The bodies close together, the shared space, the careful use of fire. The foundation does not change, only the feeling. You shift slightly beneath the blankets and the warmth adjusts again, settling more evenly around you. It is subtle, but constant. You imagine a long winter night marked not just by endurance, but by small moments of connection. A story told near the fire, a shared meal, a quiet song, each one adding something that is not measurable in temperature but still important. Historians still question how much emotional resilience influenced physical survival in such conditions, but sitting here it feels difficult to separate the two. Comfort is not only about heat, it is about presence, about not facing the cold alone. You listen again to the room as it is now. Quiet, steady, the fire low, the breathing slow. And yet beneath it you can sense the same structure that would support a gathering, the same arrangement that allows warmth to build. You close your eyes for a moment, imagining the room full, then open them again to the softer reality. Fewer voices, less movement, but still enough. You feel the warmth held beneath the blankets, the presence of others close by, and the steady glow of the embers somewhere beyond your view. And you understand something gently, even when the room is quiet, even when the celebration has passed. The warmth it created does not fully disappear. It lingers in the space, in the people, in the way they continue to stay close. And as you lie there drifting slowly between wakefulness and rest, you realize that winter is not faced alone. Not here, not like this. You lie still, the quiet of the room settling deeper around you when your awareness shifts again. Not to the warmth this time, but to something that lingers at the edge of it. The sense that winter carries more than cold. A widely accepted historical fact is that illness often increased during medieval winters, with cold conditions, limited nutrition and close living quarters contributing to the spread of respiratory and other seasonal diseases. You notice it now in small ways. A soft cough from somewhere in the room, a slight change in someone's breathing. Nothing alarming, but present. You become aware of how closely everyone lives together, how the same air is shared, how warmth is built through proximity. And with that closeness, something else travels too. Not just heat, but breath. A more unusual detail suggests that some medieval beliefs linked illness directly to cold air entering the body, leading people to cover themselves carefully at night and avoid drafts as much as possible, especially when already weak. You recall the cloth at the door, the careful layering of blankets, the instinct to tuck everything in tightly. It was not just about comfort, it was about protection. Historians still debate how much these beliefs about cold air reflected actual medical understanding, with some suggesting they were based on observation of real patterns, while others argue they were shaped more by broader theories about bodily balance and unseen forces. As you lie here, feeling the warmth beneath the blankets and the cooler air brushing lightly across your face, it becomes easy to understand how such ideas could form. The difference is immediate. The body reacts. You shift slightly, pulling the covering closer around your shoulders, reducing the heat exposure. It feels instinctive. You listen again. Another soft cough. Then stillness. The room remains calm, but there is an awareness now that warmth alone does not guarantee safety. It helps, but it does not prevent everything. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that herbal remedies, warm drinks, and simple treatments were often used during winter to manage illness, with heat itself considered part of the healing process. You imagine the pot over the fire again, not just for food, but for warmth that can be taken into the body. A warm broth, a heated drink, something to push back against the chill from within. It fits with everything else you have seen. Warmth in every form is used. You notice how those who seem more fragile are covered more carefully, their space more protected from drafts, their position closer to the center of the room. The arrangement you observed earlier now carries another layer of meaning. Not just comfort, care. You take a slow breath, feeling the warmth in your chest and the slight dryness in your throat. The air is not perfect, but it is held. Managed. Historians sometimes explore how people understood the relationship between environment and health during this period, questioning how much practical knowledge guided behavior versus inherited belief. Sitting here, it feels like a blend of both. Observation, experience, adaptation. You feel the warmth beneath you again, the slow, steady accumulation of heat held within the bedding, and you realize how important that is, not just for comfort, but for strength. The body needs it. You shift slightly and the warmth adjusts, filling the small spaces where cold might otherwise settle. You notice how even in sleep people remain covered, rarely exposing themselves fully to the air. It is not accidental. It is learned. You glance once more toward the door, imagining the cold just beyond it, then back to the people around you, each one holding their own small pocket of warmth. It feels fragile, but also resilient. A system that does not eliminate risk, but reduces it. You hear another faint movement, then stillness again. The room remains quiet. Steady. The fire continues its low, constant glow. You take another slow breath and the warmth seems to settle deeper into you now, not just on the surface, but within. It is enough. For now. And as you lie there aware of the balance between warmth and vulnerability, you begin to understand something more. Staying warm was not just about comfort, it was part of staying well. Part of enduring the season, part of moving through winter without losing too much strength. The cold is always present, but so is the effort to resist it, in every layer, in every breath, in every quiet adjustment made through the night. You lie quietly, your body now fully settled into the layered warmth, when your thoughts begin to drift beyond this single night. Beyond this room, into time itself. A widely accepted historical fact is that surviving winter in the medieval world depended not only on daily habits, but on careful preparation throughout the year, especially during late summer and autumn when resources could be gathered and stored. You begin to see it now not as separate moments, but as a continuous cycle. The fire you feel tonight began long before this evening. It began in the forest, in the cutting of wood, in the stacking and drying of it over months. You imagine the same people you see around you now, moving through warmer seasons, gathering fuel while the air was still mild, preparing for a time when stepping outside would become much harder. A more unusual detail suggests that wood needed to be seasoned or dried for months to burn efficiently, meaning that poorly prepared fuel could produce more smoke and less heat when winter finally arrived. You think of the fire again, the way it burns, the quality of its heat, and realizes that even that is shaped by decisions made long ago. Historians still debate how consistently families were able to prepare adequately for winter, with some evidence suggesting careful planning was common, while other accounts hint at years when resources fell short, leading to harsher conditions. As you lie here feeling the steady warmth beneath you, it becomes clear that this moment is not guaranteed. It is the result of success. Of preparation that worked. You shift slightly, pulling the blanket closer and imagine what it would feel like if those preparations had failed. Less fuel, thinner bedding, more gaps in the walls, the same room, but colder. You glance towards the hearth again. The embers still glow, still alive. You realize that even their presence is part of that larger effort. They have been maintained, protected, carried forward from earlier in the day. From yesterday, from every day before. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that food preservation methods such as drying, salting and storing grains also played a role in staying warm, as adequate nutrition helped the body maintain heat more effectively during cold periods. You imagine the meals prepared here, simple, but sufficient, each one adding to the body's ability to hold warmth, to endure. You feel it now, the warmth, not just around you, but within you, sustained by what has been eaten, what has been stored, what has been planned. Everything connects. Historians sometimes explore how the agricultural calendar shaped the experience of winter, suggesting that those who manage their resources well could face the cold with greater stability, while those who did not faced far greater uncertainty. Lying here, it feels like a quiet truth. This warmth is not just tonight's achievement. It is the result of many days, many decisions. You listen again to the room. The breathing remains steady. The fire holds. The cold stays outside. For now, you imagine the passing of seasons, the slow build toward this moment, the gathering of straw for bedding, the mending of walls, the preparation of clothing, each action small on its own, but together enough to create what you feel now. You take a slow breath and it feels deeper, more grounded, as if the warmth itself carries memory of work, of effort, of time. You realize that this night, as quiet as it is, represents a kind of success. Not perfection, not comfort in the modern sense, but survival, stability, enough warmth to rest, enough to continue. You shift slightly again, letting your body sink deeper into the bedding and feel the heat gather more evenly around you. It holds because everything before it held. You glance once more toward the hearth. The embers glow softly, steady and enduring. A small light, carried forward, and as you lie there, your thoughts moving slowly through the layers of time that brought you to this moment, you begin to understand something clearly. Winter is not faced in a single night. It is prepared for, built toward, lived through step by step, and the warmth you feel now is the result of all of it. Held together, just long enough. You lie there wrapped in layers that now feel almost like part of you. The warmth settles gently around your body when your awareness begins to soften. The room is quieter than it has ever been. The fire is no longer a flame, only a low, steady glow beneath ash. The sounds are smaller now. Breathing, a faint shift of straw, the distant patient wind outside. You remain still, not fully asleep, not fully awake, held in that quiet space between. A widely accepted historical fact is that for most medieval families, nights like this were repeated again and again through the winter, each one requiring the same careful balance of heat shelter and shared presence. You feel that repetition now, not as monotony, but as rhythm, the same actions, the same adjustments, the same quiet effort, night after night. A more unusual detail suggests that some households developed small personal rituals around the hearth before sleep, simple gestures or habits that mark the transition from activity to rest, reinforcing a sense of continuity and control in an otherwise uncertain environment. You can almost imagine it. The final adjustment of the fire, the last check, door, the quiet settling into place. Historians still debate how much of daily medieval life was shaped by routine versus necessity. But lying here, it feels like the two are inseparable. Routine becomes the way necessity is managed, the way the cold is held back. You take a slow breath and the air feels softer now, less sharp, more familiar. The warmth beneath the blankets has reached a steady point, not growing, not fading, just present. You feel your body relax further into it. The tension you carried when you first stepped into this space has disappeared, replaced by something quieter, acceptance. You listen once more to the room, the breathing of those around you, the faint movement of the embers, the wind still pressing gently against the walls but no longer as noticeable. Everything has settled. A quieter, lesser-known detail notes that even small fluctuations in indoor warmth during the night could influence how well people rested, making the careful management of embers and bedding essential not just for survival, but for maintaining energy for the following day. You feel that now. The importance of this balance. Too cold and sleep would be restless. Too warm and the layers would need to be adjusted again. Here it feels just enough. Historians sometimes explore how people adapted their expectations of comfort in environments like this, suggesting that what feels minimal by modern standards may have been experienced as sufficient, even reassuring in its consistency. Lying here, it begins to feel true. The warmth is not perfect, but it is reliable, and that matters. You shift slightly, then still again finding the position where the warmth settles most evenly around you. It holds. You no longer think about the walls, the door, the drafts. They are still there, but they are no longer your focus. The center of the room has drawn everything inward, including your attention. You feel the presence of others around you not as movement but as quiet reassurance. Each person contributing to the shared warmth, each one part of the same effort. You take another slow breath and it feels deeper now, more relaxed. The rhythm of your breathing matches the rhythm of the room. Slow. Stay. Unhurried. The embers give a faint glow somewhere beyond your view, their light barely reaching but their warmth still present. Holding. You imagine the hours ahead. The fire resting, the warmth gradually shifting but not disappearing, the careful balance continuing even in sleep. You feel your thoughts slowing, your awareness softening, the details of the room becoming less sharp, more blended, the boundaries between warmth, sound, and stillness fading gently together. And in that quiet you begin to gather everything you have experienced. The fire, the walls, the clothing, the bedding, the people, the animals, the effort. All of it woven into a single steady understanding. Warmth here is not a single thing. It is a collection of small acts, held together, maintained, shared. You take one final slow breath and let it settle. The room feels calm. Safe enough. The cold remains outside. The warmth remains within. And you are part of it now, resting, held in that quiet balance. Let your body sink a little deeper into the warmth around you. Feel the steady presence of the room unchanged, continuing as it has for so many nights before. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to adjust. Everything that needed to be done has been done. The fire rests, the walls hold, the blankets keep their quiet work, and you finally can let go of the effort. Just for a while, just for this night. Let your breathing slow, let your thoughts drift. The cold will wait, wait. The warmth will remain, and morning will come as it always does, softly, without hurry. You are safe here. What up? We sit near. Warm enough. And as the last awareness fades into quiet rest, the room continues its gentle rhythm around you. Unchanged, steady, carrying you through the night. Sweet dream. Blind.